I am Harem, the queen consort of one of the most powerful sultans the Ottoman Empire had ever seen. But my life wasn't always like this. I was once a slave. I was taken from my land during a raid and then sold in the slave trade. Who could have thought that one day I would become the most powerful woman in the Ottoman Empire? This is my story. Before I became Harem, I was Alexandra Lasoska, a young girl from Rohatyn, a small town in the fertile lands of what is now Ukraine. My childhood was simple, yet rich with my family around me. I lived according to the traditions of Orthodox Christianity, and with the promise of a life that seemed predetermined by generations before me. I always thought I would spend my life like my mother and her mother before me. My family wasn't wealthy, but we were very proud of our roots. The land I lived in was a melting pot of cultures, with Polish, Ukrainian, and Lithuanian cultures all blended together. This is why I grew up speaking multiple languages, a skill that would later prove crucial in my survival and success, especially when I needed to perform diplomatic duties as the queen consort. The sounds of my childhood, the church bells, the bustling marketplace, and the love of my family and friends would become distant memories once my life was abruptly interrupted by Crimean Tatars. The day that changed everything came without warning. Crimean Tatar raiders, known for their brutal slave raids, descended upon my town like a hard-hitting storm. The day that had been peaceful till then was shattered into chaos. All I could hear was screams, the clash of weapons, and the terror of families being torn apart. I was young, perhaps in my early teens when I was captured. The journey from my homeland was a nightmare of suffering and uncertainty. Bound and transported like cargo from place to place, I endured something so vile and dehumanizing as the slave trade. Hundreds of captives were packed together, and our hopes and dreams were reduced to mere commodities. Many did not survive the journey, succumbing to illness, exhaustion, or despair. But something within me refused to break. It felt like God had a different plan for me. When I arrived in Constantinople, the heart of the Ottoman Empire, I was sold in the slave markets and then brought to the Imperial Harem. The Imperial Harem was a world unlike anything I had ever known. It was a dangerous environment of shifting alliances, intrigue, and survival. Women from across conquered territories found themselves in this harem, each fighting for survival and potential favor. My education began immediately. I was trained in the local languages, culture, and the art of pleasing the Sultan. But I was more than just another concubine. My intelligence was apparent from the beginning. I learned Turkish with remarkable speed, studied the Quran, and learned how power worked in the palace. My survival in the Ottoman Empire was intrinsically linked to my ability to adapt and learn. Languages became my lifeline, my weapon, and my art of diplomacy. I mastered Turkish with an almost poetic fluence, but my linguistic skills didn't stop there. I learned Arabic, Persian, and maintained my knowledge of Ruthenian and Polish. Each language was a key to understanding the complex world around me, a tool that would help me navigate the treacherous waters of the imperial court. Unlike many who saw it as a place of limitation, I saw it as a battlefield where intelligence and strategy were the most potent weapons. I learned to read people, to understand the unspoken tensions, and to anticipate moves before they were made. Other concubines might have been content to compete for momentary favor, but I was playing a much longer game. The Sultanate of Women was a unique time in Ottoman history. For about a century, women in the Imperial Harem became powerful political players, despite not holding official titles. We were mostly former slaves who became wives and mothers of sultans. Our real power came through our sons and our ability to advise and influence the rulers. We didn't just sit in the background. We shaped political decisions, managed royal marriages, and became critical to how the empire was run. Before this period, women had little say in court politics, but we changed that. We educated our sons, planned their futures, and used our intelligence to create networks of influence. Some of us, like myself and my mother-in-law, Haseki Sultan, became so powerful that we could affect diplomacy, military decisions, and the future of the entire Ottoman Empire. This wasn't just about personal power, it was about survival and strategy, in a world where only the powerful and intelligent survived. In a world where women were expected to be silent, we found ways to speak, to act, and to matter. We turned the harem from a place of isolation into a center of political strategy. Our influence was so significant that historians now call this the Sultanate of Women, a time when women behind the palace walls truly ran the empire. Sultan Suleiman was unlike any ruler I'd encountered. Known as the Magnificent, he was not just a political leader, but a poet, a visionary, who would reshape the Ottoman Empire. When the Sultan rose to power, I was given as a gift to him by his mother, Hafsa Sultan. When I came into the Sultan's life, something extraordinary happened. Where other women might have been content to be mere objects of desire, I became a true partner, even converting to Islam for my Sultan. Our love was revolutionary. Traditionally, sultans maintain relationships with multiple concubines, with children often sent away to govern provinces. But Suleiman was different with me. He was captivated by my beauty as well as my mind. I became his closest confidant, his advisor, and his most trusted ally. The Sultan's decision to marry me was unprecedented. No previous Ottoman sultan had ever married a former slave, let alone elevated her to the position of official wife. I became Haseki Sultan, a title that transformed my status from a concubine to the most powerful woman in the empire. In fact, this was a title that was specifically made for me. This was more than a personal victory. It was a political statement that challenged centuries of established royal practices, not just in the Ottoman Empire, but all over the world. It might sound like an honorary title, but it was so much more than that. I didn't just sit quietly after becoming Haseki Sultan. I used this unprecedented position to influence policy, to advocate for charitable works, and to protect my children's future. I bore Suleiman 6 children, including future sultans Selim II and Bayezid. My role as a mother was loving, but also strategic, because I wanted to keep my children safe. The fight for succession in the Ottoman Empire had always been deadly. Many sultans used to get their brothers and their families out of the way to regain more power. I wanted my children to stay away from these dangerous norms. I wanted them to live a peaceful life. Despite my strategic approach, I was first and foremost a mother. The potential for conflict between my own children weighed heavily on my heart. The knowledge that only one could ultimately succeed Suleiman was a constant source of both political and maternal anguish. I ensured my children received the best education, understanding that their future would shape the empire. Unlike previous royal practices, I was deeply involved in their upbringing, challenging the traditions and norms of the Ottoman Empire. My children were not just heirs to the Ottoman throne, they were my greatest political and personal achievements. I saw several of my children pass away in my lifetime, but my greatest fear was my children fighting each other for succession. Sultan Suleiman outlived me, so I did not see the succession battles of my sons, and I feel that had I been alive, I would have stopped my children from fighting. Mohammed was my firstborn son, born in 1521. From the beginning, I recognized his potential. He was intelligent and charismatic, and showed early promise as a potential leader. However, fate had other plans. Despite his early potential, Mohammed would not become sultan, a fact that would deeply impact my family's future. Selim, my second son, would ultimately succeed his father as sultan. His reign would be quite different from his father's. I invested tremendous energy in his education, ensuring he received the best possible training in governance, military strategy, and Islamic studies. While he was not as strong a ruler as Suleiman, my careful preparation from when he was young would help him navigate the complexities of the Ottoman leadership. Bayezid was perhaps the most complicated of my sons. Highly educated and ambitious, he would become entangled in a devastating succession conflict with his brother Selim. It was something I had always feared, my greatest fear coming to life. This rivalry would ultimately lead to his downfall, a painful chapter in our family's history. My daughter, Mirahama, was equally important to me, and I loved her as much as I loved my sons. Mirahama was my pride and joy. Highly educated and politically astute, she'd become a significant figure in her own right. I ensured she received an education comparable to her brothers, understanding that female influence in the empire could be just as powerful as male leadership. My influence extended far beyond the harem. I corresponded with European monarchs, including King Francis I of France. As I previously said, I didn't just sit quietly as the Haseki Sultan. I did what I could. For the empire to thrive and for my children to become its future rulers, I was a diplomat and a negotiator, using my intelligence to navigate complex international relationships. My letters, written in multiple languages, demonstrated a level of sophistication and knowledge that was rare for women of that era. As the Haseki Sultan, I commissioned numerous architectural projects that would outlive me and become a strong part of my legacy. In Istanbul, I had a complex built that included a mosque, a primary school, a hospital, and a public bath. These were not just buildings, but statements of my commitment to a community welfare. The Haseki Sultan complex became a model of philanthropic architecture, serving thousands of people. My rise was not without challenges. I faced opposition from traditional court factions who saw me not just as a slave, but also as an outsider. Rumors, intrigue, and potential assassination attempts were constant threats. But I navigated these challenges with remarkable political judgment. Our love was documented in countless poems and historical accounts. Suleiman was not just a powerful sultan, but a romantic poet who wrote extensively about his love for me. Our relationship challenged the traditional transactional and political nature of royal marriages, introducing a concept of compassion and compassionate love in the imperial court. As I aged, my political influence did not diminish. I continued to be a crucial advisor to Suleiman, involved in major decisions that would shape the empire's future. My network of influence extended through my children, my philanthropic works, and my diplomatic relationships. My story is more than a personal narrative. It represents a pivotal moment in Ottoman history, a transition from a purely patriarchal system to one where women could wield significant power. I challenged existing power structures, demonstrated strong political leadership, and reshaped understanding of women's roles in royal courts. From a captured slave to the most powerful woman in the Ottoman Empire, my journey defies conventional narratives of power and possibility. I transformed not just my own destiny, but challenged the very structures that had initially enslaved me. My legacy is not just in the buildings I commissioned or the children I raised, but in the message I sent to generations: that human potential knows no boundaries, and that intelligence and resilience can overcome the most challenging circumstances. I am Harem, more than a name, more than a title. I am a testament to the extraordinary potential that lies within the human spirit.